Yo, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. So with the college spring football season going on right now, a lot of people's spring games going on, starting to wrap up, and we go into the real off season for college football. I wanted to make a college video because I just haven't made one in a while. So in this video, I'm going to be looking at every conference in FBS Division 1 and saying who I think is the best returning player in that conference. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so starting off with the AAC, the American Athletic Conference, we are going with Desmond Ridder. As many of you already know, Desmond Ridder was Cincinnati's quarterback this past season and led Cincinnati one of the best seasons they've had in a while. Undefeated regular season, got them all the way to the Sugar Bowl, where they put up a very formidable effort against, obviously, a good Georgia team, but came just short. Desmond Ridder led this team down the way. He was a great quarterback throughout the season. Great dual threat quarterback. 27 total touchdowns, 16 passing, 11 rushing. Won the Offensive Player of the Year in the American. And yeah, it's going to be coming back next year. He's going to be a senior. Was already a big leader for this team, so him coming back is going to be huge if this team wants to repeat the success they had last season. And I think with him at the helm, they have a great chance to do so. And I think just looking at who else is in the American, I think Desmond Ridder is a pretty easy choice for the best returning player in the American Athletic Conference. Alright, so for the next conference on this list, the ACC, I had to go with Sam Howell. I think this is a pretty easy choice. Sam Howell last season and the season before showed just how talented he is. I mean, in the 2020 season, he put up 3,586 yards, 30 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and an amazing 68.1 completion percentage as he led North Carolina to a New Year's Six Bowl. And North Carolina is a program that's been on the rise the last couple of years, so it'll be interesting to see how him and his team do next season. Obviously, if you've been following, who's returning next season, Sam Howell was expected to be one of the first quarterbacks taken in next year's draft. So I think he's going to be huge for North Carolina and going to be huge for them if they want to challenge in the ACC, get back to a New Year's Six Bowl, and maybe even challenge Clemson to win the conference. But looking at the rest of the conference and looking at what Sam Howell's already accomplished and the natural talent that he has, I think it's once again a pretty easy choice to make him the best returning player in the ACC. Alright, up next for the Big Ten, we've got Chris Olave. Chris Olave was a major weapon for Ohio State's offense in the past 2 seasons. Looking back at 2019, the last full season that he played for the Buckeyes, he finished the season with 49 receptions, 849 yards, and 12 touchdowns. In 2019, in the shortened season, or 2020 rather, in the shortened season, he had 26 receptions, 389 yards, and 4 touchdowns. He was a major factor, for the Buckeyes down the stretch in the season. I mean, we saw just how well he played in the playoffs in the back half of the season, and how much he elevated that offense, and just how good he made that team overall. Big Ten, though, overall was a tough one. I mean, there's a lot of good players in that conference, and no one particular guy, stood out. I mean, honorable mentions to guys like Garrett Wilson, Michael Penix, plenty of talented guys in that conference. But I just feel like Chris Olave is going to be the most impactful to his team next season. Is overall just the best weapon out of all the teams in that conference. Alright, for the Big 12, and possibly the best player on this entire list, and possibly also the Heisman favorite for next season. If I was a betting man, I'd probably bet on him. We've got Spencer Rattler. Spencer Rattler obviously has already shown that he is one of the most talented quarterbacks in the country and will likely be one of the first quarterbacks taken in the draft next year. I mean, I think him and Sam Howell are going to be just the 2 best quarterbacks in college football next season. This past season, 2020, he had over 3,000 yards at 30-31, 28 touchdowns, only 7 interceptions, completion percentage of 67.4, and 6 rushing touchdowns to go along with that. Oklahoma is going to be a force to be reckoned with next year, with a lot of returning players. Going to be an electric offense led by Spencer Rattler. Already did some great things next year, so it's going to be really exciting to see, what they do next season and how well Spencer Rattler is really able to do in his junior year now that he's really developed, has had a whole year, having the offense to himself. And I think, like many experts are saying, he's got a very good chance at being the next Oklahoma quarterback to win a Heisman and go on into the NFL as a high draft pick. So for the Big 12, once again, I think a pretty easy choice, Spencer Rattler. Right, for our first Group of 5 conference player for the video in this list, we've got Kane Madden from Conference USA. Madden was an offensive lineman for Marshall, and he was ranked as the 6th best returning offensive lineman in the country by PFF and the best non-Power 5 offensive lineman in the country. Last season, Kane was exceptional for the Thundering Herd, and he led Marshall to averaging 170 yards per game on the ground, did not allow a single sack all season. Marshall was very good last season. They were undefeated for most of the season, got all the way to the Conference USA Championship game, eventually losing to UAB, but they still had a very good season. I think next season they'll be very good as well. Really good offense, especially on the ground, and Kane Madden was a big part of that, and once again next year, he'll also be a big part of that, and I think he's got the potential to be another high draft pick as a lineman coming out of a smaller conference, as we've seen many times in the past. Coming out of the MAC, we got Dustin Crum, a 6'3", 207-pound dual-threat quarterback out of Kent State. Crum has had a good career at Kent State as he's entering his 5th year with the extra year of eligibility in 2021. The MAC had a shortened season in 2020, very short season that is, so didn't have a whole lot of games, put up some great stats. But he led the MAC with a completion percentage of 73.2, which is very, very good. In his last full season, he threw for 2,625 yards with 20 touchdowns and just 2 interceptions. And in the 2020 season, it's going back to that shortened season, he led all MAC quarterbacks in both rushing yards and rushing touchdowns with 240 yards and 4 touchdowns. All right, for the Mountain West Conference, we've got a guy who, when researching this video, I found very interesting. And this is a guy who I heard a little bit about during the season, and looking more into him, could be a guy that I would definitely watch out for next season. Possibly one of the most underrated, talented quarterbacks in all college football. That's Carson Strong from Nevada. In the 2020 season, which was just 9 games for him, consider that, he had 2,858 yards, 27 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and a 70.1 completion percentage. All that in just 9 games, which is just crazy. He was only a sophomore this past season, and he won Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year, becoming the first underclassman and the first Nevada player to ever win the award. He finished 3rd in the country in completions per game and 9th in passing touchdowns with 27. This guy, was just crazy. It'll be really interesting to see what he can do, in a full season where he can play a full 12 games. And now that he's really gotten the hang of college football, I'm really intrigued to see what he can do next season, see if we can have, another good group of 5 story coming out of the Mountain West. Alright, staying out west, but going back to the Power 5, we got the Pac-12. And there were a lot of good players to choose from in the Pac-12, so this one was a harder decision for me. But after researching, I decided it had to be Kayvon Thibodeaux. Thibodeaux, even though his numbers, obviously it means alignment, his numbers aren't going to be as eye-popping and as crazy, and as flashy as some other guys, you might think of in the Pac-12. But just looking at him, looking at what he's capable of, looking at his athleticism, looking at what he's done so far, you just no denying that this guy is just special and will be a great NFL player. At 6'5", 250 pounds with his insane athleticism and quickness, he's just been an absolute menace so far in college football. He had a quiet season in 2020, obviously it was a shortened season, but in his freshman year in 2019, he had 35 tackles, 9 sacks, and 1 forced fumble. He's also the number 1 ranked player in the whole country coming out of high school, and he's very high up in many people's draft board for the 2022 draft. I'm looking forward to see what kind of havoc Kayvon Thibodeaux can wreak on Pac-12 offenses this season, and I think that he is going to be a great prospect going into the 2022 draft. Moving on to another conference that has a lot of talent and was hard to choose from, but also a conference that lost a lot of talent in the draft this offseason, we've got the SEC. Like I said, it was tough to pick, but in terms of just talent-wise and production, throughout his career, I had to go with Derek Stingley from LSU. Derek Stingley, in my opinion, is the best defensive back in college football, and is going to be the first defensive back taken in the 2022 draft. Stingley, like everybody else on LSU's team last year, had a quiet 2020 season. He missed a few games due to injury, and their defense, just the way it was run, Bo Pelini was just an absolute dumpster fire, and he didn't really get to show off what he's capable of. But in 2019, his freshman season, we saw just how good Derek Stingley is. He was highly touted coming out of high school, had 6 interceptions in 2019, and was a key part of LSU's national championship run, really anchoring the Tigers secondary from the corner position. I think he's going to have a great season in 2021 with new defensive coordinator Durante Jones coming in. And I'm looking forward to see, what this LSU defense is going to look like with him being a junior, being now a leader on this team, and just being the talented player that he is. I expect big things from him. I expect him to go very high in the draft. And yeah, for the SEC, it's got to be Derek Stingley. Last but not least, we got the Sun Belt Conference, so we had one of the most exciting stories of the 2020 season in Coastal Carolina. And leading that Coastal Carolina team to a magical 2020 season was quarterback Grayson McCall. McCall was a freshman who just made an immediate impact at Coastal Carolina in their kind of spread, but with kind of an option element type of offense. He was a great dual threat quarterback. He had 2,488 passing yards, 26 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions, and he had 569 yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground. He was the guy who just really made their offense go. I mean, it was a very vertical, very get guys in space and, get them going. And without him, that team just, wouldn't be what they were. I mean, he also just brought the swagger to that team that just had plenty of swagger to go with them. And as only a freshman, I think, behind him, Coastal Carolina can go on to have another season like they had in 2020 and could be another group of 5 team that you see really make a run in the next few years, almost like maybe even a situation like we have at Boise State, a while ago. So I'm really intrigued to see what him and his team can do next season. In the Sun Belt, really don't think there's any other argument that Grayson McCall will be the best returning player in the 2021 season.